There are a lot of true crime stories that are so infamous it feels like we hear about them all the time. Ted Bundy, the Zodiac Killer, Jeffrey Dahmer, the list goes on and on. Their names have become almost synonymous with the idea of evil itself, and their horrifying acts have been etched into our collective memory. Documentaries, podcasts, books, and movies have made sure that these tales remain in the public consciousness. But what if I told you that there are just as many, if not more, stories out there that are equally chilling, equally tragic, and equally baffling? Stories that, for one reason or another, have been overshadowed by the more infamous cases. These are the tales of crimes that shook their communities, baffled investigators, and often remained shrouded in mystery, but have somehow slipped through the cracks of history. In this video, we're going to explore a collection of these lesser-known true crime events. They might not be as widely recognized, but they're no less significant. From unexplained disappearances to shocking murders, each case is a grim reminder of the darker side of humanity, and a testament to the enduring search for answers, justice, and closure. So settle in as we uncover the little-known true crime stories you may never have heard about, until now. Case 1. The Murder of Skyler N. On a warm summer night in July 2012, 16-year-old Skyler N. quietly slipped out of her family's apartment in Star City, West Virginia. It wasn't unusual for Skyler to sneak out to meet her friends. She was a typical teenager, outgoing, bright, and beloved by her parents. But that night would be the last time anyone in her family saw her alive. Skyler's parents, Dave and Mary N., were immediately concerned when she didn't come home the next morning. Skyler was responsible and punctual, the kind of teenager who always let her parents know where she was. When she didn't show up for her shift at the local Wendy's that day, alarm bells went off. The Neeses reported her missing, but at first, police suspected she had run away. After all, there were no signs of a struggle, and Skyler had left through her bedroom window of her own accord. For weeks, Skyler's friends, Shalia Eddy and Rachel Schoaf, appeared heartbroken over her disappearance. They posted tributes on social media, helped distribute missing person flyers, and comforted Skyler's parents. Shalia, in particular, was like a second daughter to the Neeses, spending countless hours at their home. But beneath their apparent grief, a dark secret was festering. As the investigation unfolded, surveillance footage from the Neeses' apartment complex revealed a chilling clue. Around midnight on the night Skyler disappeared, a car pulled up outside the building. Skyler got into the vehicle willingly, and the car drove off. The car was eventually identified as belonging to Shalia Eddy. When questioned, Shalia and Rachel initially claimed they had dropped Skyler off near her home later that night. But their stories began to unravel as inconsistencies emerged. Months passed, and the pressure mounted. Finally, in January 2013, Rachel Schoaf confessed to a horrifying truth: she and Shalia had planned and carried out Skyler's murder. The motive? According to Rachel, they simply didn't want to be friends with Skyler anymore. It was as cold and senseless as it sounds. They had lured Skyler out under the guise of a late-night hangout, driven her to a remote area near the Pennsylvania border, and stabbed her to death. Rachel led investigators to the site where they had left Skyler's body, which had been hidden under brush and debris. The discovery brought a heartbreaking end to months of uncertainty for the Neese family. Both girls were arrested and eventually sentenced for their roles in the murder. Rachel Schoaf pleaded guilty to second-degree murder and was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Shalia Eddy, who showed no remorse during the trial, was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 15 years. Skyler's senseless death left a lasting scar on her community. In her memory, West Virginia passed Skyler's Law, which mandates that Amber Alerts be issued for all missing children, even those who are initially believed to have run away. The murder of Skyler N. is a stark reminder of how even the most trusted relationships can hide the darkest betrayals. It's a story of innocence shattered and a family left to grapple with unimaginable loss, all at the hands of those they thought they knew. Case 2. The Murder of Kate Pusey. Kate Pusey was a 24-year-old Peace Corps volunteer stationed in Benin, West Africa, in 2009. Passionate, dedicated, and deeply compassionate, Kate had joined the Peace Corps to make a difference in the world. She taught English in a small rural village and quickly became beloved by her students and the local community. But beneath the surface of her idyllic volunteer work, danger was lurking. Kate's story took a tragic turn when she discovered troubling information about a local man named Jacques Agagnan, who worked as a contractor for the Peace Corps in Benin. Agagnan was responsible for recruiting and supervising host families for volunteers, but Kate learned that he had been sexually abusing some of the young girls in the village. Horrified, she felt it was her duty to report him. In early March 2009, Kate sent an email to Peace Corps officials, detailing what she knew about Agagnan's behavior. She specifically requested anonymity, fearing retaliation if her involvement became known. But somehow, word of her report leaked. On the night of March 11, 2009, just days after sending the email, Kate was found dead outside her home. Her throat had been slit, and her body left to be discovered by villagers the next morning. The brutal nature of the crime shocked the local community and sent ripples of fear through the Peace Corps. Investigators quickly focused on Jacques Agagnan and his associates. It was suspected that Agagnan had learned about Kate's report and sought revenge. However, despite the strong circumstantial evidence and widespread suspicion, the case became mired in complications. Local authorities struggled to build a solid case, and the lack of direct evidence made prosecution difficult. Kate's murder sparked outrage and grief, both in her home state of Georgia and within the international Peace Corps community. Her family, devastated by the loss, became vocal advocates for greater protections for Peace Corps volunteers. They argued that the organization had failed to safeguard Kate's anonymity, a failure that ultimately cost her life. In the years following her death, Kate's family worked tirelessly to honor her legacy and prevent similar tragedies. Their efforts culminated in the passage of the Kate Pusey Peace Corps Volunteer Protection Act of 2011. The legislation mandated stronger whistleblower protections for volunteers and increased accountability within the organization. Despite these reforms, Kate's case remains officially unsolved. Agagnan was arrested but later released due to insufficient evidence, and no one has ever been convicted of her murder. Her family continues to seek justice, holding on to the hope that one day the truth will come to light. Kate Pusey's story is a heartbreaking example of how doing the right thing can come with devastating consequences. It's a reminder of the dangers faced by those who speak out against injustice, and of the urgent need to protect those who risk everything to make the world a better place. Case 3. The Murder of Teresa. On December 6, 2006, 13-year-old Teresa went to school like any other day in the small town of Katzrin in the Golan Heights, Israel. Teresa was a bright, lively girl, well-liked by her classmates and teachers. But that day, her life was cut tragically short in a crime so brutal it would haunt her community for years to come. Teresa didn't return home after school, and her worried parents contacted the authorities. A search of the school grounds led to a horrifying discovery. Teresa's body was found in a locked bathroom stall. She had been stabbed multiple times, and the scene was so gruesome that investigators initially struggled to make sense of what had happened. The murder shocked the tight-knit community, and police were under immense pressure to find the killer. Within days, they arrested Roman Zadorov, a Ukrainian immigrant who worked as a janitor at the school. Zadorov initially confessed to the murder, but later recanted, claiming his confession had been coerced. Despite his claims, he was convicted in 2010 based on his confession and circumstantial evidence, including a pair of bloody footprints allegedly matching his shoes. But as the years went on, Zadorov's conviction became increasingly controversial. Many believed he had been wrongfully accused and that the real killer was still at large. Critics pointed to inconsistencies in the evidence and the lack of a clear motive. Forensic experts raised doubts about the footprint evidence, and questions arose about whether the confession had been obtained under duress. Adding to the mystery were whispers of another potential suspect, a teenage girl who allegedly had a history of violent behavior and had reportedly been seen near the crime scene. However, these leads were never fully pursued by investigators, fueling suspicions that the police had rushed to close the case without thoroughly examining all possibilities. The case took another dramatic turn in 2021 when Israel's Supreme Court ordered a retrial for Zadorov, citing new evidence and growing concerns about the fairness of his original trial. During the retrial, experts re-examined the forensic evidence, and the spotlight once again fell on the mishandling of the investigation. Terrada's murder remains one of Israel's most infamous and unresolved cases. For her family, the years have been marked by heartbreak and frustration, as they continue to seek justice for their daughter. For the public, the case has become a symbol of the flaws in the justice system and the devastating consequences of a rush to judgment. The murder of Teresa is a chilling reminder that justice isn't always straightforward. It's a story of loss, controversy, and the enduring hope that one day, the truth will finally come to light. Case 4. The Disappearance of Teresa N. Beer. On June 1, 1987, 16-year-old Teresa N. Beer set out on what was supposed to be an adventure. She left her home in Fresno, California, to go camping in the Sierra Nevada mountains with a man named Russell Welch. Welch, a 43-year-old family acquaintance, had promised Teresa a trip to remember, claiming he could help her find Bigfoot, the mythical creature he was obsessed with. Teresa was excited about the trip, even though her family had reservations about her spending time alone with Welch. He was known for his eccentric behavior and fixation on Bigfoot, often telling stories of his encounters with the creature. Despite their unease, Teresa's family reluctantly allowed her to go, trusting Welch's assurances that she would be safe. But Teresa never came home. When she didn't return as planned, her family reported her missing, and a search was launched. Welch, who returned from the camping trip alone, told a bizarre and troubling story. He claimed that Teresa had been abducted by Bigfoot during their time in the mountains. The authorities, unsurprisingly, didn't buy Welch's story. They suspected foul play and began investigating him as their primary suspect. Welch's account was riddled with inconsistencies, and he couldn't provide a clear timeline of events. Despite extensive searches of the area where they had camped, no trace of Teresa was ever found. Welch was eventually charged with child stealing, but the case against him was weak. Without a body or concrete evidence of what had happened to Teresa, the prosecution struggled to build a convincing case. Welch maintained his innocence, insisting that his story about Bigfoot was true. In the end, the charges were dropped, and Welch walked free. The disappearance of Teresa N. Beer remains unsolved to this day. Over the years, her case has become intertwined with folklore and conspiracy theories, with some speculating about the involvement of Bigfoot or other supernatural forces. But for Teresa's family, the reality is far more devastating. They have spent decades searching for answers, clinging to the hope that one day they might learn the truth about what happened to their daughter. This case is a haunting example of how a disappearance can become shrouded in myth, obscuring the very real tragedy at its core. Teresa's story is a reminder of the fragility of trust and the enduring pain of unanswered questions. Case 5. The story of Terry Jo Duperrault, aka the Sea Orphan. In November 1961, an idyllic family vacation turned into an unthinkable nightmare for 11-year-old Terry Jo Duperrault. Her survival against all odds would shock the world and earn her the haunting nickname, the Sea Orphan. The Duperrault family, Arthur, his wife Jean, and their 3 children, Brian, Terry Jo, and Renee, had chartered a sailboat, the Bluebell, for a week-long trip through the Bahamas. The family was thrilled to escape the cold Wisconsin weather and enjoyed the sun-soaked waters. Joining them on the voyage were the ship's captain, Julian Harvey, and his wife, Dean. For several days, the trip went smoothly. The Duperraults enjoyed snorkeling, fishing, and exploring the islands. But on the night of November 12th, chaos erupted aboard the Bluebell. Terry Jo was asleep in her cabin when she was awakened by the sounds of shouting and running above deck. When she ventured out to see what was happening, she stumbled upon a horrific scene. Her mother and brother were lying lifeless in a pool of blood. Julian Harvey, the captain, was the only other person on board, and he quickly ordered Terry Jo to return to her cabin. Terrified and confused, she obeyed, but the nightmare was far from over. Harvey, it was later revealed, had murdered the Duperrault family and his own wife in a calculated plan to collect life insurance money. After killing everyone else on board, he scuttled the Bluebell, hoping to stage the tragedy as an accidental sinking. But Harvey underestimated Terry Jo. As the boat began to sink, she managed to escape her cabin and found a small cork float. Clinging to it, she drifted alone in the open ocean, without food, water, or protection from the elements. For nearly 4 days, Terry Jo endured scorching sun, dehydration, and the chilling fear of sharks circling below. Her miraculous rescue came on November 16th, when the crew of a Greek freighter spotted her floating in the vast expanse of the Atlantic. Weak and sunburned, she was barely alive, but she survived. Julian Harvey, meanwhile, had been rescued days earlier after fleeing the sinking ship in a dinghy. He told authorities a fabricated story about a sudden squall capsizing the boat. But when he learned that Terry Jo had survived, he knew his lies were unraveling. Before he could be arrested, Harvey took his own life in a Miami motel room. Terry Jo's survival was hailed as a miracle, but her ordeal left deep scars. She rarely spoke of the events for decades, choosing to live a quiet life away from the spotlight. In 2010, she broke her silence with the publication of her memoir, Alone, Orphaned on the Ocean, in which she detailed her harrowing experience and her journey to healing. The story of Terry Jo Duperrault is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Her courage and will to survive in the face of unimaginable horror make her one of the most remarkable survivors in true crime history. Case 6. The Satanic vs. Murder of Hitoshi Igarashi. On July 11, 1991, the tranquil academic life of Hitoshi Igarashi, a distinguished Japanese scholar and translator, came to a brutal and tragic end. His murder was a chilling reminder of the global controversy surrounding Salman Rushdie's novel The Satanic Verses and the violent repercussions it ignited. Igarashi was a professor of comparative culture at Tsukuba University and a respected translator of English literature into Japanese. In 1989, he undertook the ambitious task of translating the Satanic Verses into Japanese, introducing the controversial novel to readers in his home country. The book, which fictionalized elements of Islamic history, had sparked outrage among many Muslims worldwide, leading to its banning in numerous countries and the infamous fatwa issued by Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Khomeini. The fatwa called for the death of Salman Rushdie and anyone involved in the book's publication or distribution. While Rushdie himself went into hiding, others associated with the novel became targets of violence. Hitoshi Igarashi was one of them. On that fateful July evening, Igarashi was found dead in his office at Tsukuba University. He had been stabbed multiple times, his lifeless body discovered by a colleague the next morning. The attack was swift, calculated, and bore all the hallmarks of an assassination. The murder sent shockwaves through Japan, a country with low crime rates and little exposure to the kind of religious extremism that had fueled the attack. Authorities launched an investigation, but the case quickly became mired in complications. No suspects were apprehended, and the identity of Igarashi's killer remains unknown to this day. Igarashi's murder was part of a broader wave of violence linked to the Satanic Verses. Around the same time, Ettore Capriolo, the Italian translator of the novel, was stabbed in his Milan apartment but survived. William Nygaard, the Norwegian publisher of the book, was shot and seriously injured in Oslo in 1993. These attacks underscored the far-reaching and deadly consequences of the fatwa. For Igarashi's family, friends, and colleagues, his murder was a devastating loss. He was remembered as a gentle, intellectual man who sought to bridge cultures through literature. His decision to translate the Satanic Verses was not a political statement, but an academic endeavor rooted in a belief in the freedom of expression and the importance of sharing ideas. 3 decades later, the case remains unsolved, and Igarashi's killer has never been brought to justice. His death serves as a somber reminder of the dangers faced by those who champion free speech in the face of extremism. The murder of Hitoshi Igarashi is not just a story of violence but a cautionary tale about the power of words and the perilous intersection of art, politics, and religion. It highlights the enduring struggle for intellectual freedom and the sacrifices made by those who dare to defend it. Case 7. Bruce MacArthur, the serial killer of Toronto. Toronto, Canada, known for its diversity and vibrant LGBTQ+ community, was shaken to its core in the 2010s by the horrifying crimes of Bruce MacArthur, a man who lived among them but harbored a dark, predatory secret. MacArthur, a seemingly ordinary landscaper in his late 50s, was a well-known figure in Toronto's gay village. Outwardly affable, he worked as a mall Santa during the holidays and maintained a network of friends and clients who trusted him. But behind the facade, MacArthur was methodically targeting men from the LGBTQ+ community, luring them into his orbit before ending their lives in brutal fashion. The disappearances began to raise alarms in 2010 when several men of Middle Eastern or South Asian descent went missing from the gay village. Many of these men were marginalized, some struggling with immigration issues or living closeted lives. The police initially dismissed connections between the cases, attributing the disappearances to transient lifestyles or personal choices. But as the years went by, the pattern became undeniable. By 2017, a task force was formed to investigate the string of vanishings, though it faced criticism for its perceived lack of urgency and sensitivity to the LGBTQ+ community's concerns. Activists accused the police of ignoring the community's fears, and tensions between the authorities and residents of the gay village reached a boiling point. The breakthrough came in January 2018, when investigators tied Bruce MacArthur to the disappearance of Andrew Kinsman, a beloved community member who had gone missing the previous year. Kinsman's meticulous calendar, which recorded a meeting with Bruce on the day he vanished, became a key piece of evidence. A search of MacArthur's apartment revealed chilling evidence: photos of his victims, some taken after their deaths, and personal belongings he had kept as trophies. Most horrifyingly, investigators discovered human remains buried in large planters on properties where MacArthur had worked as a landscaper. MacArthur was arrested and eventually charged with the murders of 8 men. During his trial, details emerged about his methodical approach to targeting, killing, and disposing of his victims. He preyed on men who were vulnerable and isolated, using his charm and familiarity to gain their trust before committing his heinous acts. In 2019, Bruce MacArthur pleaded guilty to 8 counts of first-degree murder and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for 25 years. The sentencing brought some measure of closure to the victims' families and the LGBTQ+ community, but the scars of his crimes remain. The case highlighted systemic issues within law enforcement, particularly the mishandling of missing persons cases involving marginalized communities. It also underscored the importance of vigilance and solidarity within vulnerable populations. Bruce MacArthur's crimes were a betrayal of the trust and safety that Toronto's gay village had long symbolized. His story is a grim reminder that predators can hide in plain sight, and justice, while eventually served, often comes at a devastating cost. Case 8. The Pizza Killers, aka Thomas Koskovich and Jason Vreeland. In the summer of 1997, 2 seemingly ordinary young men, Thomas Koskovich and Jason Vreeland, became infamous for their involvement in a brutal crime that shocked their small community in upstate New York. The case would come to be known as the Pizza Killers, Murder, a chilling tale of betrayal, greed, and senseless violence. Koskovich and Vreeland, both in their early 20s at the time, had been close friends for years. They had grown up in the same area, shared similar interests, and even worked together at a local pizzeria. On the surface, they appeared to be just another pair of young men with no apparent criminal inclinations. However, beneath this facade lurked a deep-seated resentment, and a thirst for money that would ultimately lead them down a dark path. The victim in this case was 42-year-old Paul Tony Barrow, a well-liked and respected man who owned the pizzeria where Koskovich and Vreeland worked. Barrow had been kind to both men, giving them jobs and treating them like family. But despite his generosity, the 2 young men harbored a simmering anger towards Barrow. They resented his success, his control over the pizzeria, and the way he ran his business. Koskovich and Vreeland began to devise a plan to murder Barrow and steal his money. They believed that by eliminating him, they would be able to take over the pizzeria and live a life of luxury. The plot was carefully planned, and the 2 men waited for the right moment to strike. On the night of the murder, Koskovich and Vreeland lured Barrow to the pizzeria under the pretense of a late-night meeting. Once inside, they ambushed him. Koskovich, armed with a knife, attacked Barrow, while Vreeland helped restrain him. After a violent struggle, Barrow was fatally stabbed. The killers then ransacked the pizzeria, taking whatever cash and valuables they could find. But their plan quickly unraveled. Koskovich and Vreeland had underestimated the level of violence they had unleashed. They left behind significant evidence at the scene, including bloodstains and fingerprints, which would soon lead investigators to them. The investigation into Barrow's murder was swift, and both Koskovich and Vreeland were arrested within days. The two men initially denied their involvement in the crime, but as the evidence mounted against them, they eventually confessed to the murder. Their motive was clear: greed and a desire for power. In 1998, both Koskovich and Vreeland were convicted of second-degree murder and sentenced to lengthy prison terms. Their actions, driven by jealousy and a misguided sense of entitlement, left a community in shock and a family grieving the loss of a beloved man. The case of the pizza killers is a stark reminder of how envy and resentment can drive people to commit unspeakable acts. It also serves as a cautionary tale about the dangers of trusting those who may be hiding darker motives behind a friendly facade. Case 9. The Hakoi Supermarket Triple Murder. On the evening of March 30, 1995, the quiet suburban town of Hakoi, located just outside Tokyo, was rocked by a horrific and senseless act of violence that would come to be known as the Hakoi Supermarket Triple Murder. The case remains one of Japan's most chilling and mysterious criminal events, leaving a lasting scar on the community and a trail of unanswered questions. The victims were a family of three: 55-year-old Kazuko Hasegawa, her 25-year-old daughter, Yuko, and Yuko's 3-year-old son, Kaido. The Hasegawa family owned and operated a small, family-run supermarket in Hakoi, a business they had poured their lives into for years. On that fateful day, Kazuko, Yuko, and Kaido were preparing to close the store for the night when an intruder entered. The attacker, armed with a knife, brutally murdered all three members of the family. Kazuko was found in the store's office, Yuko's body was discovered near the cash register, and little Kaido was found in a corner of the store. The violence was particularly savage. Kazuko and Yuko had been stabbed multiple times, and Kaido had been fatally slashed in a way that suggested the killer had shown no mercy, even to the innocent child. The crime scene was disturbing in its brutality, but what made it even more puzzling was the lack of a clear motive. The Hasegawa family was well liked in the community, and there was no indication that they had any enemies or had been involved in anything that could explain such a violent act. The supermarket had been a small, local business with no apparent ties to criminal activity. For weeks, the police had little to go on. There were no witnesses, and the security footage from the store had been wiped clean, adding to the mystery. The investigation seemed to stall, and the community was left in fear, wondering who could have committed such a senseless crime. Then, in a breakthrough that shocked everyone, the police made an arrest. The perpetrator was identified as 35-year-old Takahiro Fuji, a man with no prior criminal record but a history of mental health issues. Fuji had been a regular customer at the supermarket and had known the Hasegawa family for years. Fuji's motive was unclear at first, but it was later revealed that he had been struggling with severe financial difficulties and had developed a fixation on Yuko. He had visited the supermarket multiple times in the weeks leading up to the murder, and it was believed that he had become obsessed with her. In a fit of rage and desperation, Fuji attacked the family, killing them in a brutal attempt to take control of their business. Fuji was arrested and charged with triple murder. During his trial, it was revealed that he had been experiencing severe emotional distress and had lost touch with reality in the months leading up to the killings. He had been overwhelmed by feelings of inadequacy and frustration, which ultimately led to his violent outburst. In 1997, Fuji was convicted of all three murders and sentenced to death. The case left the community in shock, not only because of the extreme violence but also because of the seemingly random nature of the attack. The Hakoi supermarket triple murder remains a haunting reminder of how deeply personal obsessions and financial struggles can sometimes manifest in unspeakable violence. The tragedy also raised important questions about mental health, societal pressures, and the vulnerability of small business owners. For the Hasegawa family, their lives were taken in an instant, leaving behind a legacy of pain and unanswered questions. Case 10. The Leicester Street Murders. On the night of February 6, 2008, the city of Memphis, Tennessee, was forever scarred by one of the most brutal and senseless mass murders in its history. The crime would come to be known as the Leicester Street Murders, a case that shocked the community and left a family destroyed. The victims were 7 members of the same family: 33-year-old Rita Bivens, her 9-year-old daughter, her 6-year-old son, her 2-year-old granddaughter, and 3 other children, aged 1, 5, and 10, who were all related to Rita. They lived in a modest home on Leicester Street in a quiet residential neighborhood, a place where the children played outside and the family was known to be friendly and kind-hearted. The murders were discovered the morning after the killings, when Rita's brother, who had been trying to reach her by phone, arrived at the house and found the horrific scene. Inside, he found the bodies of his sister, the children, and their grandmother, all brutally slain. Some had been shot, while others were stabbed. The level of violence was shocking, and the crime appeared to be a senseless act of rage. Investigators were initially at a loss for leads. There was no sign of forced entry, and the family had no known enemies. There were no witnesses, and the motive for such a violent attack remained unclear. The police were left with little evidence, but the case quickly garnered media attention, and the pressure to solve it mounted. As the investigation continued, detectives learned that Rita's boyfriend, 33-year-old Jesse Dotson, had been involved with the family and had been living in the home at the time of the murders. Dotson had a criminal history, and his presence in the house was now seen as a crucial part of the case. However, Dotson initially denied any involvement in the murders, claiming he had been out of the house at the time of the killings. But as the investigation progressed, new evidence began to surface. Police discovered that Dotson had been involved in a violent altercation with his brother, 16-year-old Lamar, just days before the murders. Lamar had been living with Dotson and Rita and had been close to the family. Investigators began to focus on Lamar as a possible suspect, and the pieces of the puzzle slowly began to come together. In a stunning turn of events, Lamar Dotson was arrested in connection with the murders. It was revealed that he had been involved in a dispute with his brother Jesse, which had escalated into a violent confrontation. In the aftermath of the argument, Lamar, who had a history of violent behavior, allegedly decided to take matters into his own hands. He returned to the Leicester Street house and carried out the killings, murdering his family members in a brutal act of revenge and anger. The case shocked the community not only because of the brutal nature of the murders but also because of the family connection. Lamar Dotson's actions were seen as a betrayal of the very people who had cared for him, and his violent outbursts left an entire family destroyed. In 2009, Lamar Dotson was convicted of 7 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His actions left a permanent scar on the city of Memphis, and the tragedy of the Leicester Street murders remains a painful reminder of how anger, jealousy, and unresolved conflict can spiral into unspeakable violence. For the surviving members of the family, the pain of losing so many loved ones in such a violent manner is unimaginable. The case also raised questions about the failure of the justice system to intervene in Lamar Dotson's life before his violent tendencies led to such a horrific outcome. The Leicester Street murders are a tragic reminder that sometimes, the most dangerous people are those closest to us, and that family ties do not always prevent betrayal or violence. Final case: the disappearance of Ray Grier. In 2005, the sudden and mysterious disappearance of Ray Grier, a well-respected district attorney in Center County, Pennsylvania, left authorities, his family, and the public baffled. Despite extensive investigations and widespread media coverage, his case remains unsolved, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions and theories that continue to intrigue true crime enthusiasts and legal experts alike. Ray Grier was known for his work as a prosecutor, handling a wide range of cases, including those involving child abuse, sexual assault, and other serious criminal offenses. He was a dedicated public servant, respected by his colleagues and the community. However, on April 15, 2005, Grier vanished without a trace, sparking an investigation that would go on for years. It all started when Grier failed to show up for work on that fateful Friday. His girlfriend, Patty Fornicala, became concerned when she couldn't reach him. She knew he had been planning a trip to the town of Lewisburg, about an hour away, to visit his mother. However, when she called his cell phone, there was no answer. His car was found parked near a trail in the nearby town of Lewisburg, but there was no sign of Grier. His disappearance was perplexing, especially considering his reputation for being a responsible and reliable individual. The initial theory was that Grier might have been the victim of foul play, possibly linked to his work as a prosecutor. But there were no signs of a struggle, and no one seemed to have any motive to harm him. Investigators began to explore other possibilities, including the possibility that Grier had simply decided to disappear. One of the most puzzling aspects of the case was the discovery of Grier's laptop, which was found in a river near the town of Lewisburg several months after his disappearance. The laptop had been wiped clean, with all files and data deleted, but forensic experts later discovered that Grier had searched for information about how to erase files and remove his online presence in the days leading up to his disappearance. This led to speculation that Grier may have intentionally vanished, possibly due to personal or professional reasons. Further investigation revealed that Grier had been dealing with some personal struggles, including a strained relationship with his ex-wife and a growing sense of dissatisfaction with his career. Some speculated that he might have been experiencing a midlife crisis and chose to disappear in order to escape his responsibilities. However, there was no concrete evidence to support this theory. As the years passed, theories about Grier's disappearance continued to circulate. Some believed that he had been murdered by someone seeking revenge for his work as a prosecutor, while others speculated that he had staged his own disappearance to start a new life. There were even rumors that he had been involved in a secret investigation that led to his vanishing. However, none of these theories could be proven. In 2009, after 4 years of investigation, the case was officially closed, but Ray Grier's disappearance remains one of the most baffling unsolved mysteries in Pennsylvania's history. His family and friends continue to hold out hope for answers, but the truth behind his disappearance remains elusive. The case of Ray Grier raises important questions about the complexities of human behavior, the pressures faced by those in high-stress professions, and the lengths to which some individuals might go to escape their circumstances. It also serves as a reminder that even in the age of advanced technology, some disappearances remain inexplicable, and the search for answers can span years, leaving behind a lingering sense of mystery and unease. As we've seen today, these lesser-known true crime stories are just as chilling and perplexing as the more famous ones. From the brutal murders of families to mysterious disappearances, these cases leave us with lingering questions and a sense of unease. What drives people to commit such unthinkable acts? And what truly happened in these cases that remain unsolved? Do you think we'll ever get the full truth behind these stories? Or will they forever remain mysteries? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you found these cases as fascinating and disturbing as I did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into true crime and unsolved mysteries. And if you're curious about even more chilling stories, be sure to hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.